The alien market was alive with noise. Voices shouted in different languages, haggling over prices. The smell of cooked meat mixed with the sharp scent of strange flowers. Bright stalls lined the streets, selling shiny metals, colored fabrics, and fruit in shapes a human had never seen before. In the middle of the noise, a sudden shout rose above everything else. A heavy-set alien vendor grabbed a small figure by the arm. His voice was full of anger. "Thief!" he yelled. "She took my rare fruit, worth 10 credits." The crowd reacted quickly. Heads turned, and in seconds, curious faces surrounded them. The girl was small, her clothes worn and dusty. She had wide golden eyes and dark hair tied back roughly. She shook her head again and again, her thin hands raised. "I didn't take anything," she said in a trembling voice. But the crowd didn't believe her. "She's a liar," someone shouted. "She's been caught before." "She should be locked up," another voice added. "She's nothing but trouble," a third voice said, and the others nodded. Two market guards pushed through the crowd. Their armor clinked as they walked, their reptilian eyes scanning the scene. The vendor shoved the girl toward them. "Check her bag," he demanded. One guard grabbed the small cloth bag hanging from her shoulder and yanked it open. The crowd leaned forward, eager to see the proof. From behind the crowd, with a tall human in a dark jacket, stopped walking. His name was Daniel, and he had just come to the market for supplies. He frowned as he watched the scene. Something in the girl's eyes caught his attention. They were afraid, yes, but also sharp, watchful. Not the eyes of someone who had been caught red-handed. He stayed silent for the moment, watching carefully. The guard reached into the bag and pulled out a small torn piece of cloth and a flat piece of metal, shaped like a charm. "No fruit." The vendor's face twisted with frustration. "She dropped it before you came," he insisted. "She hid it somewhere." But the guard looked unsure. The girl's voice cracked as she spoke. "That's my mother's charm. It's all I have left of her." She clutched it tightly to her chest. The crowd muttered, "She's lying. She planted that there. She's clever, but not clever enough." The second guard shrugged. "Maybe we take her in for questioning." Daniel stepped forward. "Wait." His voice was calm but firm. The guards turned to look at him. "You don't have proof she stole anything. You've got no fruit, no witness except the vendor." The vendor sneered. "And who are you? Another outsider here to tell us our business." Daniel ignored him. He knelt slightly so he could see the girl's face. She looked at him with a mix of confusion and hope. "Did you take it?" he asked softly. Her head shook once, sharp and certain. "No," she whispered. That was enough for him. He straightened. "Then she's coming with me." The crowd exploded in protest. "You can't do that! She's guilty! You'll regret this." The guard stepped between him and the angry voices. One of them hissed, "Human, this is not your fight. Let her go." But Daniel didn't move. "If it's not my fight, then let me take her. If she's guilty, you can come find me later, but I'm not letting you drag her off without proof." The vendor's voice grew louder, his tone mocking. "So you want to protect this lying alien? Fine. Take her, but you'll be sorry." His eyes narrowed like he was already planning something worse. Daniel didn't answer. He put a hand on the girl's shoulder and started walking away, guiding her through the crowd. Some stepped back, others spat on the ground as they passed. They passed. The guards didn't follow, but their cold stares stayed on his back. Once they reached a quieter street, Daniel slowed his pace. The girl walked close to him, still clutching her bag like it was her life. Her steps were small, almost cautious, as if she was waiting for him to change his mind and push her away. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Lyra." "All right, Lyra," he said. "You can walk with me for now." Her voice was so quiet he almost missed it. "Why did you help me?" Daniel didn't look at her. "Because everyone else seemed sure you were lying, and I don't trust a crowd that's too sure of anything." For a moment, they walked in silence, the noise of the market fading behind them. But even in the quieter streets, Daniel noticed something. The hairs on the back of his neck rose, footsteps, light, careful ones, not his, not hers. Someone was following. He didn't say anything yet, but he knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The narrow street felt cooler away from the market noise, but Daniel could still sense eyes on them. He didn't turn around, not yet. Lyra walked beside him, her small hands clutching the strap of her bag. Her golden eyes kept flicking to the ground, as if she didn't want to meet his gaze for too long. At the next corner, they reached an open area where several vendors sold cooked food. The smell of fried meat and sweet bread drifted in the air. Daniel stopped near a bench. "Sit," he said. Lyra obeyed, her shoulders hunched. He crouched in front of her, keeping his voice low. "Tell me exactly what happened before I saw you." She shook her head. "It won't matter. They never believe me." "It matters to me," he said, her lips pressed together. Finally, she whispered, "I was walking past his stall. I stopped to look because he had the same fruit my mother used to buy when I was little. He saw me looking. He yelled before I even touched anything. Then everyone believed him." Daniel studied her face. She didn't look like someone spinning a story. Her eyes didn't dart away when she spoke. Her voice was steady, even when she talked about being accused. He was about to ask more when he noticed a shadow move in the corner of his vision. Someone was standing half hidden behind a stack of crates, pretending to browse the food stalls. Daniel pretended not to see. He straightened, handed Lyra a small piece of bread he'd bought earlier, and said, "Eat, we'll move soon." Two market guards appeared from the street they had come from. They walked slowly, talking to each other, but keeping their eyes on him and Lyra. One of them, the taller one, called out, "Human, the vendor insists you stole his witness. We are here to take her back." Daniel stood his ground. "She's not a witness. She's a suspect, and you have no proof." The guard smirked. "We have enough proof for the market law. Outsiders don't get to decide." Lyra's fingers tightened around her bread. "They'll take me," she whispered. Daniel didn't look at her. "If you had proof," he told the guard, "you would have taken her already. You're here to scare me into giving her up." The shorter guard's expression hardened. "Last warning, step aside." Daniel let his hand rest on the grip of the small blaster at his belt. His voice stayed calm. "Last warning for you, too. If you want her, you'll have to go through me. And I'm not in the mood for games." A few tense seconds passed. The taller guard finally clicked his tongue and turned away. "Not worth it here," he muttered to his partner. "Let's go." They walked off, but Daniel knew it wasn't the end. Lyra looked at him like she didn't understand. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." Daniel started walking again, motioning for her to follow. "I know what it's like to be cornered by people who've already decided you're guilty. I don't like that feeling, and I won't let them get away with it if I can help it." She followed in silence, her steps light but quick to match his. When they reached the edge of the market district, he stopped at a small shop run by an old alien with 4 eyes and a wrinkled face. Daniel handed over a few credits for a small packet of dried meat and a flask of water. The shopkeeper accepted the payment but didn't smile. Instead, he gave a pointed look at Lyra and said, "You're making enemies, human." "I've had worse," Daniel replied and left without waiting for more. By the time they reached the quieter side streets, the sun had shifted, throwing long shadows across the cobblestones. Lyra finally spoke again, her voice almost too soft to hear. "They've been after me for weeks." Daniel glanced at her. "Who's they?" "I don't know," she said. "But the vendor isn't the first. Every time I go anywhere, someone accuses me of something. Sometimes it's stealing, sometimes it's spying. I think they want me gone." Daniel thought about the shadowy figure he'd seen earlier and the way the guards had appeared so quickly. "You have any idea why?" Her hands tightened around her bag again. "No, but my mother used to tell me that if anything happened to her, I should keep the charm safe. Maybe it's about that." He didn't press her further. Instead, he led her toward an old building near the outer edge of the district. It looked abandoned, its windows covered in dust. He pushed the door open. The air inside was stale but quiet. "We'll stay here for now," he said. Lyra stepped inside, looking around nervously. "You don't have to keep me," she said suddenly. "I can go." Daniel shook his head. "If you go, they'll find you by nightfall, and then you'll be alone again. You stay." She lowered her eyes but didn't argue. As they settled into the dim light of the room, Daniel finally allowed himself to glance through the crack in the door. The street outside was empty now, but he knew someone was out there, watching. And he knew the real trouble hadn't even started yet. The building was quiet, but the silence felt heavy, like it was waiting to break. Daniel sat near the doorway, his back against the wall, while Lyra curled up in a corner with her knees pulled to her chest. She hadn't eaten much of the dried meat, only picking at it while her golden eyes stayed fixed on the shadows. When night fell, the city outside changed. The distant chatter of the market faded, replaced by the low hum of machinery and the occasional bark of street dogs. Somewhere far off, metal shutters slammed closed. Daniel stayed awake, listening. He could hear faint footsteps now and then, too light to be casual. Someone was circling the area. He glanced at Lyra. "They're still watching," he said. Her head lifted. "I told you," she whispered. "They won't stop." "Then you're going to tell me why," he said firmly. "No more pieces. All of it." Lyra's shoulders stiffened. She hesitated before speaking. "It started a month ago. At first, it was just stares in the market. Then a vendor accused me of taking bread. I thought it was just bad luck, but every few days someone else would accuse me of something. Small things. Then they got bigger. They never caught me with anything, but no one cared. They wanted me gone." Daniel frowned. "That's not just bad luck. Someone's pushing it." "I don't know who," she said. "But my mother, before she died, she told me to keep the charm safe. She said it was important. I don't even know why. Maybe it's worth something. Maybe it's not. But if they're after me because of it..." She looked down at the small metal piece in her hand. "I can't lose it." He studied the charm. It looked simple, just a flat, worn piece of metal with faint markings he didn't recognize. Still, he could feel there was more to it. "Then we keep it safe," he said. The sound of a boot scraping against stone made them both freeze. Daniel moved silently to the doorway and peered outside. The street was dim, lit only by a single flickering lamp. A shadow moved along the far wall. Whoever it was, they were careful, staying just out of the light. Daniel closed the door quietly. "We're leaving," he said. Lyra blinked. "Where?" "Somewhere they can't corner us. Staying in one place makes us easy to find." They slipped out the back of the building, moving through narrow alleys that smelled of damp and rust. Lyra followed closely, her small steps quick but silent. Daniel's eyes scanned every doorway, every rooftop. Twice, he caught glimpses of movement behind them. Someone was definitely trailing them. After half an hour of weaving through side streets, they reached a small bridge over a dark canal. Daniel stopped, turning suddenly. A figure froze in the shadows, then darted back. "Stay here," Daniel told Lyra, stepping toward the darkness. The figure tried to run, but Daniel was faster. He caught the stranger by the collar and slammed them against the wall. The alien was thin, with pale skin and wide, panicked eyes. "Why are you following us?" Daniel demanded. The stranger shook his head. "Not me. I was told to watch, that's all." "By who?" The alien hesitated, glancing at Lyra. "If I tell you, they'll kill me." Daniel's grip tightened. "If you don't, I might do it first." The stranger swallowed hard. "The vendor from the market, he's working for someone else, a man from the upper levels. He said the girl has something that belongs to him. I don't know what." "I swear." Daniel's next question never came. A sudden hiss cut through the air, and the stranger's eyes went wide. A thin blade jutted from his chest. Daniel let go in shock as the body slid to the ground. Lyra gasped, backing away. Daniel looked up just in time to see a dark figure disappear into the rooftops. Whoever they were, they moved fast, too fast to chase without leaving Lyra unguarded. He knelt beside the fallen alien. There was no saving him. The wound was precise, meant to kill instantly. Beside the body, scratched into the wall with quick, deep strokes, were words in jagged alien script. Daniel couldn't read it, but Lyra could. Her voice shook as she translated. It says, "She doesn't live to see the next moon." Daniel stood slowly, his jaw tight. The warning was clear. This wasn't just some petty market squabble. Someone powerful wanted Lyra dead, and they weren't afraid to kill anyone in the way. He took her hand and pulled her away from the scene. "We move faster from now on, and you don't leave my sight." She didn't argue. Her small hand gripped his tightly as they disappeared into the maze of streets, the echo of the warning still burning in both their minds. The streets were quieter as they moved farther from the canal, but Daniel knew the calm wouldn't last. The killer who struck the stalker had moved with the speed of someone trained. That meant they would try again. Every few steps, Daniel glanced behind them, checking rooftops, alley corners, and doorways. They reached a rundown part of the city where the buildings leaned close together. Most of the windows were dark, and the air smelled faintly of burning metal. Daniel guided Lyra toward a narrow passage and stopped near a doorway covered in dust. He pushed it open and stepped inside first, making sure it was empty before letting her follow. The place was an old storage room, filled with broken crates and rusted tools. It wasn't safe for long, but it would hide them for now. Lyra sat down on one of the crates, still gripping the charm in her hand. She didn't look up when she spoke. "They won't stop. Even if we hide, they'll find us." Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "That's why I'm not just hiding. I'm going to find out who's behind this." Her head jerked up. "If you go looking, they'll kill you too." "They already want me dead," he said simply. "Helping you made sure of that. I might as well find out why." Lyra's gaze lowered again, but her fingers tightened around the charm. Daniel watched her for a moment before stepping to the window and peeking out. The street outside was empty, but a faint glint on a far rooftop caught his attention. He pulled back instantly. "We've got company," he said. Lyra's eyes widened. "Here?" Daniel moved quickly. "Not for long. Stay behind me." They slipped out through a side door, moving down another alley. He kept them close to the shadows, listening for footsteps. Twice he thought he heard movement, but it was distant. Still, he knew they were being tracked. They reached a busier street lit by old lamps. Daniel decided to blend into the crowd instead of avoiding it. The more people around, the harder it would be for an assassin to take a clean shot. They walked past vendors closing for the night, travelers hurrying to find rooms, and groups of workers laughing loudly as they left the factories. Halfway down the street, Daniel saw him, a tall alien with a long coat moving through the crowd without touching anyone, eyes scanning ahead. The coat shifted just enough for Daniel to catch the outline of a concealed weapon. The alien's gaze locked onto Lyra. Daniel acted fast. He pushed Lyra toward a narrow side alley and followed her in, making sure she stayed in front of him. The alley was dark, the walls close. The sound of footsteps followed them in. The attacker moved with confidence, his weapon now visible in his hand. "Give me the girl," he said in a calm voice. "You can walk away." Daniel stepped forward, placing himself between Lyra and the stranger. "You'll have to go through me." The alien's lips curled into a thin smile. "I've done worse." Before he could aim, Daniel lunged, grabbing the attacker's wrist and slamming it against the wall. The weapon clattered to the ground. The alien fought hard, throwing quick punches, but Daniel blocked most of them, forcing him back. The fight was short but brutal. Daniel finally pinned him against the wall, pressing his forearm against the alien's throat. "Who's paying you?" he demanded. The attacker only laughed. "Doesn't matter. By the next moon, she'll be gone." Daniel tightened his grip, but before he could press further, the alien twisted sharply, using surprising strength to break free. He dove for his weapon, but Daniel kicked it away. The attacker turned and fled down the alley, disappearing into the crowd before Daniel could follow. Breathing hard, Daniel turned back to Lyra. She hadn't moved, her eyes wide in fear. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head, but her voice was unsteady. "He looked at me like I wasn't even a person. Just something to take." Daniel picked up the attacker's weapon and slipped it into his belt. "That's exactly how they see you, which is why we can't let them win." They left the alley quickly, taking a winding route back toward the outskirts. By the time they reached another abandoned building, the city was nearly silent again. Inside, Daniel sat across from Lyra and spoke quietly. "That man wasn't just a random killer. He knew you. He knew the deadline." Lyra swallowed hard. "The next moon," Daniel nodded. "That gives us less than a week. We need to figure out what that charm means and why it's worth your life." She looked down at the small piece of metal again, running her thumb over its strange markings. "I don't know if it's a key or a map or just something my mother gave me, but she told me it would protect me. I don't understand how." Daniel's eyes stayed on her. "Then we find out, because if we don't, there won't be a next step for either of us." Outside, in the shadows, unseen eyes watched the building. The hunter hadn't given up. He was only waiting for the right moment to strike again. The abandoned building was cold, the wind slipping through cracks in the walls. Daniel stayed near the doorway, listening for any sound outside. Lyra sat on the floor with her back against an old wooden crate, her knees pulled close. She had the charm in her hands, turning it over and over like she was trying to read the answers from its surface. Daniel finally broke the silence. "If they want you that badly, you can't just sit here waiting. You need to be ready if they come." Lyra looked up, frowning. Ready how? He crouched in front of her. To fight. To run. To survive. If I'm not there, you need to make it out on your own. She shook her head quickly. I don't fight. I run. That's the problem, Daniel said. He stood and pulled a small knife from his belt, handing it to her. First lesson, never give them the first move. You see trouble, you react fast. Her golden eyes studied the blade. She held it awkwardly at first, like it was a dangerous animal that might bite her. Daniel showed her how to grip it, how to keep her feet steady. She copied him, still unsure, but she didn't refuse. They practiced in the dim light, the sound of their footsteps echoing on the dusty floor. Daniel made her step forward, step back, and twist away from his reach. At first, she moved too slowly, but he was patient, correcting her grip and balance. You're small, he told her, but that can be an advantage. You move quicker, you can get under their guard. After an hour, she was breathing hard, her hair sticking to her forehead. But there was something different in her eyes, less fear, more focus. They took a short break, sharing the last of the water. Lyra hesitated, then asked, Were you always a fighter? Daniel shook his head. No, but I learned because I had to. The people chasing us, they won't stop because you're scared. They stop when you make it too costly to come after you. Her fingers tightened around the knife. She didn't say it, but he could tell she understood. That night, Daniel spread out his jacket for her to sleep on while he stayed near the door. He kept one hand on his blaster, listening to the wind outside. But just past midnight, the wind carried something else, a faint crunch of gravel. He didn't wake Lyra. He moved silently to the side of the door, pressing his back to the wall. A shadow passed the crack under the door, then another. 2 people. No light footsteps like before. These were heavier, more confident. Daniel's hand closed around the blaster grip. He waited until the latch turned, then kicked the door inward with all his strength. The 2 intruders stumbled back in surprise. One of them raised a weapon, but Daniel fired first, the bolt hitting the wall inches from the man's head. Drop it, he shouted. The man hesitated, then slowly let it fall. The second intruder, a woman with sharp eyes and a scar across her cheek, didn't move. She was watching Lyra, who had woken and now stood with the knife in her hands. The woman smirked. So the little thief learned to hold a blade. Lyra's grip tightened, but she didn't speak. Daniel stepped between them. You're not taking her. The woman tilted her head. We don't need to take her. She'll come when she realizes you can't keep her safe. Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he took one step closer, his voice dropping. You've got 3 seconds to disappear before I make you regret staying. The man with her shifted nervously. Let's go, he muttered. The woman's eyes stayed locked on Lyra a moment longer. Then she turned and walked away. Daniel shut the door behind them and locked it as best he could. Lyra was still standing in the same spot, the knife trembling slightly in her hand. Daniel walked over and gently pushed the blade down. You did fine, he said. Her voice was quiet. I froze. You didn't run, he corrected. That's the first step. She let out a shaky breath and sank back onto the crate. They're getting closer, Daniel nodded, which means tomorrow we start moving again, but this time we'll choose the ground. We make it harder for them to control the fight. Lyra looked at him for a long moment. Then, without a word, she scooted closer to him, resting her head against his arm. Daniel didn't move away. Outside, the city was still dangerous, but in that small moment, neither of them felt entirely alone. The morning came with a dull gray sky, the kind that made the whole city look tired. Daniel woke before Lyra, listening for any movement outside. The streets were quiet, but he didn't trust the quiet anymore. He packed what little food and water they had left, then gently shook Lyra awake. She blinked, rubbing her eyes. We're leaving again? We can't stay in one place, Daniel said. If they found us last night, they can find us again today. They left the building through the back door, keeping to the narrow alleys. Daniel's eyes scanned every rooftop and shadow. Lyra walked close to him, her knife hidden under her sleeve. The training from the night before had given her a different kind of walk. Still cautious, but not helpless. By midday, they reached the edge of the market district. Daniel stopped near a street where cargo transports were parked. He checked the time on a small wrist device and muttered, If he's still here, he'll be early. Who? Lyra asked. An old friend, Daniel replied. Someone who might help us get out of the city. They waited near a stack of metal crates. Minutes passed. Then a man in a dark coat approached, his steps quick, his face half hidden under a hood. "Daniel," he said quietly. "Been a long time." "Too long," Daniel answered. He nodded toward Lyra. "We need safe passage, off-world if possible." The man glanced at her, then back at Daniel. "I can get you to the docks tonight, but it'll cost." Daniel handed him a small pouch of credits. The man weighed it in his hand, then gave a short nod. "Meet me at the cargo yard, Sector 12, midnight." As the man walked away, Lyra frowned. "You trust him?" "Not really," Daniel admitted, "but we're running out of options." They spent the rest of the day moving between crowded streets, avoiding open areas. Daniel kept his head low, but he noticed more eyes than usual following them. By the time the sun dipped low, the air felt heavy, like the city itself was holding its breath. When midnight came, they approached the cargo yard. It was quiet except for the distant hum of machines. Stacks of shipping containers created narrow paths that twisted like a maze. "This doesn't feel right," Lyra whispered. Daniel agreed, but they were already too far in to turn back without being noticed. The man from earlier stepped out from behind a crate, smiling faintly. "Right on time." Before Daniel could respond, the sound of metal gates slamming shut echoed through the yard. Heavy locks clicked into place. Lyra's eyes went wide. Figures began stepping out from the shadows. 6, maybe 7 of them. At the front was the vendor from the market, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "You should have stayed out of it, human." Daniel's hand went to his blaster. "Let her go." The vendor chuckled. "She stole something from me." "She didn't take anything," Daniel said. "You're right," the vendor said with a smile. "She didn't take fruit. She took something far more valuable. She just doesn't know it yet." Lyra stepped back, her hand instinctively going to the charm in her bag. The vendor's eyes followed the movement. "Ah, there it is." Daniel moved in front of her. "You're not getting it." The vendor's voice turned cold. "Then you're not leaving here." He gestured, and the armed men spread out, blocking every exit. Daniel fired first, his blaster shot hitting the ground near the vendor's feet. The men rushed forward. Lyra ducked behind a crate, clutching her knife. Daniel fought in quick bursts, firing, moving, striking with the butt of his weapon when they got too close. But there were too many. One of the attackers reached Lyra, grabbing her arm. She slashed with the knife, the blade cutting across his hand. He yelped and stumbled back, giving her a chance to slip away. Daniel saw her moving and covered her with rapid shots. The vendor shouted over the chaos, "Bring me the girl! Kill the human!" Daniel's breathing grew heavier. They were being pushed toward the center of the yard, boxed in. He knew they couldn't win in a straight fight. "Lyra!" he called. "The gate!" She understood instantly, darting toward the far side. Daniel fought his way after her, using the last of his blaster's charge to force the attackers back. They reached the gate, but the lock was thick and heavy. Daniel smashed the control panel with the butt of his weapon. Sparks flew, and the lock gave way with a loud snap. They pushed the gate open just enough to slip through, then ran into the dark streets without looking back. Only when they were several blocks away did they stop. Lyra was breathing hard, but her grip on the charm was steady. Daniel looked at her and said, "We're not running anymore. Next time, we choose where the fight happens." She nodded, her eyes fierce despite the fear. "Then we make them regret chasing us." The streets were empty under the pale light of the twin moons. Daniel led Lyra through twisting alleys until they reached the far edge of the city. Here the buildings were old and crumbling, and the smell of the market was replaced by the sharp tang of rust and damp stone. He stopped beside a low warehouse with a broken roof. "This is it," he said. "If they want to fight, we'll give them one here." Lyra looked at the shadows inside the warehouse. "Why here?" "Because I know this place," Daniel replied. "One way in, one way out. If we block the door, they can't surround us." They spent the next hour preparing. Daniel stacked broken crates and rusted metal sheets into a barrier just inside the entrance. Lyra, moving quietly, scattered bits of glass across the floor to make it harder for anyone to move silently. He handed her a small metal pipe to keep at her side. "If someone gets too close, swing hard. Don't hesitate." Her golden eyes met his. "I won't." By the time the first footsteps approached, the moons had shifted lower in the sky. The sound was slow and deliberate, like the walker wanted them to hear. Daniel crouched behind the barrier, blaster ready. Lyra was beside him, her breathing steady. The vendor's voice called out from outside. You've made this difficult, human. You should have handed her over when you had the chance. Daniel didn't answer. More footsteps followed. Several men, their boots scraping against the stone floor as they stepped inside. The dim moonlight lit their weapons. Behind them, the vendor entered, his face twisted into a smile. This ends tonight. Daniel fired the first shot, the bolt slamming into a crate near the door. The attackers flinched, giving him a few seconds to fire again. The narrow entrance worked in his favor. They couldn't all rush in at once. Lyra swung her pipe at the first man who tried to climb the barrier, the metal cracking against his arm. He fell back with a shout. The fight became a blur of sound, blaster fire, shouts, the clang of metal against metal. Daniel kept them at bay, forcing them to fight one at a time. But the vendor didn't rush in. He stayed back, watching like a predator, waiting for the right moment. Two attackers managed to push through the barrier. One swung a blade at Lyra, but she ducked low and jabbed the pipe into his stomach. He collapsed, gasping for air. Daniel caught the second one with a hard punch that sent him sprawling into the glass-strewn floor. You've gotten better, Daniel muttered to Lyra between shots. She almost smiled. You taught me. But their small victory didn't last. The vendor finally stepped forward, drawing a sleek weapon from his coat. Enough, he said, his voice calm. Give me the charm, girl, and I'll let you both walk away. Lyra's hand went to the small bag at her side. She glanced at Daniel, and he shook his head. Don't believe him. The vendor sighed. I was trying to be reasonable. His weapon shifted toward Daniel. Lyra's eyes widened, but she didn't freeze this time. She leaped forward, swinging the pipe with all her strength. The blow caught the vendor's wrist, sending the weapon skidding across the floor. Daniel surged forward, tackling the vendor into the wall. They struggled, each trying to overpower the other. The vendor was strong, but Daniel fought with a desperate energy. He slammed the man's head into the wall, knocking him off balance, then twisted his arm until the vendor cried out in pain. With one final shove, Daniel threw him to the floor. The remaining attackers hesitated, glancing at their leader. Daniel raised his blaster, his voice sharp. Pick him up and get out. Now. They didn't argue. Two men grabbed the vendor, dragging him toward the door. Before leaving, the vendor looked at Lyra with pure hatred. This isn't over, girl. The next moon still comes. When they were gone, the warehouse was silent except for the sound of Daniel's breathing. Lyra stepped closer. The charm still clutched in her hand. You were right, she said quietly. They'll keep coming. Daniel nodded. Then we keep moving, but not just running. We'll find out what this is and why it's worth so much trouble. She looked at the charm, its faint markings glowing slightly under the moonlight. For the first time, she didn't just see it as a memory of her mother. She saw it as the key to something bigger, something dangerous. She slipped it back into her bag, then met Daniel's gaze. Where you go, I go. He gave a small nod. Then let's go somewhere they won't expect. They stepped out into the cold night, leaving the empty warehouse behind. The city around them was still full of danger, but together they felt like they could face whatever came next. And from that night forward, Lyra never left his side.